Last year, I went out with my wife and an old friend to see the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in a real life theater before they someday go away for good. This has been a trend for the past half decade at least, where older films would have showings, and when getting closer to Halloween, that's when the horror films generally have their turn. Back in 2020, it was 4 weeks of horror films: The Exorcist, Friday the 13th, A Nightmare on Elm Street, and Halloween. For many of this age, the movies are first watched at home or at a friend's house where they have the family that is more loose on what they allow their kids to do. You could have been like me watching the horror films that would appear on cable television. Either way, these fleeting periods wouldn't last, as we would someday move from going out to buying our films to having them on our own pocket computers. And with this power that we have now, what's the point in going to the movies? Why would I pay to go watch The Lord of the Rings in a theater when instead I can open my library of digital movies and start it at home? And actually, that's a good question. Why did I do that? The same question should go to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I was already familiar with the film, but once my buddy invited me to go see it in a theater, the only question was making sure I didn't have anything else going on. For my wife, this would be her first time seeing it. As tradition would have it, I sat with my popcorn and let the ride start, and I was already in the mood after visiting a Halloween shop. The lights darken, and after the ads run, I'm greeted with the dirty and rustic visuals of analog tape. Horror can often be portrayed with the visual cliches, but the idea of being trapped in the middle of nowhere can have its own feeling of dread. In the kind of weather climate brought in by Texas, the heat can be massively brutal, and the film portrays this, giving a feeling that there's something in the air affecting the locals, which has later provided a sense of duality as the main characters discover the house owned by the Hardesty family, only for that sense of duality destroyed by the dust, bones, decay, and the macabre of what would come. And what I would notice is how I could almost feel the dirty atmosphere of the house. My brain was sending me the imagined sensations of the feelings of sawdust and grime as the film was projected onto the screen, a feeling I could not get from watching the Texas Chainsaw Massacre on a Blu-ray disc or streaming from Shudder. Bear in mind that the film was remastered, which could have had an effect. The horrors of not just the violence, but also the mental torture were more upfront in the viewing of the theater seat. The slow burn of Sally mentally breaking turns up the tension as the audience is being brought into the climax of the film, and by the time it's all over and we have to leave the theater, there's an overwhelming sense of decompression described with a soft yet audible "holy shit." Later that night, I'm talking with my wife and asking her what was the part that freaked her out the most, and the answer was obvious as she explained Grandpa sucking Sally's blood. You see, Grandpa was brought in downstairs, and those who don't know would think it's just a corpse until the realization slowly slams their gut. What truly makes the scene feel surreal is how much of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is surprisingly grounded in reality with a hint of the supernatural. The brutality of the sun's heat, driving people to do weird and horrific things, the feeling of being stranded, and how the villains are normal people without their insanity. This movie touches on the naivety of trusting strangers. Some people should never be trusted, and yet you may not see an objective way to measure when a stranger should or should not be listened to. A person could see enough violence, and then it's no wonder some roads will have signs advising not to pick up hitchhikers. I love this age where classic horror films are having a new chance in the theaters. I may not be seeing the newest entries since it's hard for them to grab my attention now, but the idea that newer generations can have the experience I did is incredible. Please, do not squander this opportunity. And that's not the only film that I went out to see in theaters recently. As far as classic horror films go, I did the same for The Devil's Rejects. For me, being a pretty massive Rob Zombie fan, it was an immediate yes as soon as I was asked whether or not I was going to go. And this film was also remastered, I believe. I don't totally know what was going on in the preparation stages of getting the film ready to be played in theaters again. All I cared about was that this movie that I've loved for years and years is finally on the big screen for me to be able to experience with my buddy. And being able to see the grittiness, the violence that can feel in between cartoonish and somewhat realistic, the way that the characters were able to just banter together and in a moment, in just a brief moment, Otis, Baby, and Captain Spaulding feel like regular people. You forget they're villains as soon as the topic of Tutti Frutti ice cream is brought up. But then the violence kicks back again, and you realize I'm watching horrible things happen to horrible people and by horrible people. The sheriff is also a horrible person. There is no good guy here. It almost doesn't matter, but you still care about what's going on in the story. You still feel that sense of excitement when Tiny comes back and saves the day. And I could not have been more thankful to have been able to watch this film in a theater. And then having that excitement of a brand new song from Rob Zombie being teased. I would be learning that within this same week that the film came out in theaters, I'd be able to be treated to a new song from Rob Zombie. And what a good week that was. What a good time. So yeah, just like with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, just like with The Devil's Rejects, Halloween, Friday the 13th, if it's a classic horror film and you have access to a theater, take the time. Don't make it some extravagant thing where you're spending a ton of money either, but just enough to be able to enjoy yourself, a drink, the popcorn, and the camaraderie, and that's really it. That's all you need. And I am clueless as to what is going to happen with these theaters as time keeps going. Are they going to shut down? Part of me thinks that's possible, but I don't know. There's no way for me to tell. In fact, I can't tell you what movies are currently playing in theaters. Last time I went to the theaters was in January to watch the Iron-Blooded Orphans and Gundam Wing films that came out, and well, even Gundam Wing that was Endless Waltz in 4K, finally remastered. I've already watched that movie more than 20 years ago. I already knew what was going on with it. Really, I don't have much of a reason to go to the theaters anymore. Maybe you don't too. In the age where we can just watch things off of Netflix and Shudder and whatever else wants a piece of the streaming pie, really, what's the choice?